My wife's abusive ex came back after she died, isolated our son in a motel while feeding him, lies about a fake family, all to try to steal her estate through manipulation. So my daughters and I did what we couldn't take back. 10 years later, I still think about it. When I first met Linda 25 years ago, she was a single mom recovering from a difficult divorce. Marcus was her bright but angry teenager who'd been through a lot. His biological father had hit them, then remarried and started a new family, basically abandoning Marcus. I understood I was stepping into a complicated situation. Thing was, I never tried to be his dad. I told Marcus early on that I was just David, and I'd be whatever he needed me to be. For years, that meant just being the reliable adult who showed up. I taught him to parallel park in the high school parking lot. I was there at 2 a.m. when he got food poisoning at college. I co-signed his first apartment lease when his credit wasn't good enough. But there's one night that defined everything between us. Marcus was 16 when 3 seniors from his school jumped him after a basketball game. They'd been harassing him for months about being abandoned trash. They hit him with bats, left him in the parking lot. I found him because he'd managed to call me. His jaw was broken, ribs cracked, internal bleeding. While waiting for the ambulance, he kept apologizing for getting blood on my shirt. At the hospital, when they said he needed emergency surgery, he grabbed my hand. "Don't leave me alone, Dad. Please." First and only time he called me Dad. I didn't leave. I stayed all night and told my boss I couldn't come in so I could stay with him. When he woke up terrified, I was there. For the next 6 months, I drove him to school because he was too scared to walk. I sat in the parking lot all day in case he needed me. Went to every police interview, every court date. When those kids got off with community service and Marcus had a panic attack in the courthouse bathroom, I held him while he cried. On top of that, Linda and I had twin daughters, Sarah and Emma, now 22, when Marcus was 16. I remember being worried he'd feel replaced, but he seemed to adore his little sisters so much it brought us closer. He'd babysit them with me, he taught them to ride bikes, and even came home from college just to see their school plays. But that was with them. With me, there were always boundaries. Like when he graduated from business school, I wasn't in any of the family photos, just Linda and him. When he got promoted to regional manager at his company, Linda told me privately that he'd specifically asked her not to bring me to the celebration dinner. It stung, but I understood, or I tried to. The real pain came during Linda's illness. She battled pancreatic cancer for 8 months, and Marcus was there constantly. We worked as a team, taking shifts at the hospital, managing her medications, advocating with doctors. For the first time in 25 years, I felt like we were truly family, but the feeling was bittersweet, countered by the fact the love of my life was dying, and too much pain to even say my name as her eyes closed for the last time. After Linda died, Marcus handled most of the funeral arrangements while I was barely functional. He gave a beautiful eulogy about how his mother had been his only real parent, and how he was grateful she'd shown him what unconditional love looked like. Sarah and Emma were sobbing next to me, and I saw several people glance our way with confusion. The day after the funeral, Marcus hugged me and said, "Thanks for everything you did for Mom, David. She was lucky to have you." Then he left. That was the last real conversation we've ever had. For months, I called him weekly, left voicemails asking how he was doing, updating him about his sisters, inviting him to Sunday dinners. Nothing. The girls tried reaching out too. Sarah told me he responded to her texts with single-word answers. Emma said he claimed he was too busy with work to visit. This past summer, Sarah graduated from college. Marcus didn't come. He sent a card with a check, but no explanation. Emma was furious. "He promised me when I was 8 that he'd be at all our big moments," she told me through tears. I guess that promise died with Mom. 2 weeks ago, Sarah called me. Apparently, Marcus had been talking to his girlfriend about how lonely the holidays would be this year. The girlfriend reached out to Sarah on social media, suggesting that maybe the family should extend an olive branch and invite Marcus for Thanksgiving. Sarah thinks I should call him personally. "He's probably waiting for you to make the first move, Dad," she said. Yes, both girls call me Dad. "He knows he's always welcome," I told her. "But maybe he needs to hear it from you directly," Sarah insisted. Emma disagrees. "He's a 38-year-old man who ghosted his family," she said. "Why should Dad chase after someone who clearly doesn't want to be here?" The truth is, I'm exhausted. I spent 25 years trying to earn a place in Marcus's life, respecting his boundaries, never pushing too hard. I supported him financially through school, celebrated his achievements from whatever distance he set, and loved him the best way I knew how. When Linda was alive, she was the bridge between us. She'd make excuses for both of us, smooth over the awkward moments, insist we were making progress. Without her, I don't know how to navigate this relationship anymore. I want Marcus at Thanksgiving. I want him to know his sisters miss him. I want to tell him about the scholarship fund I'm setting up in Linda's name and ask his input. I want some kind of family from the ruins of our grief, but I don't know if he wants to be here. I stared at my phone for another hour after Sarah hung up. The screen went dark, then lit up again when Emma texted asking if I'd made a decision. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked to Linda's home office, now just a room full of boxes I hadn't had the strength to sort through. The certified letter arrived 3 days later, interrupting my morning coffee. The return address made my blood run cold. Hayward and Associates, with an address showing Richard was back in town. Richard Hayward, Marcus's biological father who disappeared 25 years ago after breaking Linda's arm and Marcus's spirit. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. The letter referenced Linda's estate, claiming unspecified outstanding matters that required immediate attention. I'd handled all of Linda's affairs with our family lawyer. There were no outstanding matters. I went straight to Linda's filing cabinet, searching for anything about Richard. In the bottom drawer, I found a folder I'd never seen before. The label, written in Linda's careful handwriting, read, "Richard, do not worry, David." Inside were printed emails dating back 6 months before Linda's diagnosis. Richard had found her somehow, started with friendly messages about reconnecting with my son. The tone shifted quickly. By the third email, he was demanding money for stolen years. By the 10th, he was threatening legal action. Linda had never said a word. I called Sarah immediately. She answered on the second ring, probably expecting my decision about Thanksgiving. "Did Mom ever mention Richard contacting her?" I asked without preamble. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Sarah's voice came through, smaller than usual. "She made me promise not to tell you." My chest tightened. "Sarah, it was right after her first chemo session. She got a letter from him. She was so upset, but she said you had enough to worry about about with her treatment. She made me swear. I sank into Linda's desk chair. Did Emma know? We both knew. Sarah's voice cracked. Mom made us promise. She said she'd handle it after she got better, but she never got better. I set up a conference call with both girls. Emma joined from her campus apartment, Sarah from hers across town. The weight of their secret hung heavy between us. There's more, Emma finally admitted. Mom said Richard had been trying to contact Marcus. She was terrified he'd manipulate Marcus while she was sick. Did Marcus know? I asked. We don't know, Sarah said. Mom handled everything. She said she had a plan. The next morning, I sat in the office of Linda's lawyer, Mr. Chen. He examined the letter from Richard's attorney with a deepening frown. I need to show you something, he said, pulling out a thick file. Linda came to me 8 months ago. She was documenting everything. The file contained dozens of emails, text message screenshots, even recordings of voicemails. Richard hadn't just been asking for money. He'd been claiming Linda had promised him part of her estate in exchange for giving up parental rights years ago. These emails where she supposedly promises him money, Mr. Chen pointed to several printouts. I believe they're forgeries. The writing style doesn't match Linda's other correspondence, but I need time to verify. What does he want exactly? Half of everything. He claims Linda stole his son and owes him compensation for lost years. The office door opened without warning. Richard walked in like he owned the place, and beside him, shoulders hunched and eyes downcast, was Marcus. I hadn't seen Richard in 25 years, but I'd have recognized him anywhere. Same sharp features Marcus had inherited, same calculating eyes that had once made Linda flinch. He'd aged well, probably using charm to coast through life like he always had. David, Richard said smoothly, his hand settling possessively on Marcus's shoulder. I thought we should all meet face to face. After all, we're family. Marcus wouldn't look at me. He stood rigid beside Richard, staring at the floor like he had as a teenager when he was upset. Marcus, I said softly, I didn't know you were in touch with Richard. 2 weeks, Richard answered for him. I reached out to my son with proof of how certain people tried to keep us apart. He deserves to know the truth about why his real father wasn't in his life. Mr. Chen cleared his throat. Mr. Hayward, any discussions about the estate should go through proper channels. Oh, we're not here about money, Richard smiled, but his eyes remained cold. We're here about family, about a boy who was kept from his biological father by people who thought they knew better. Marcus finally looked up, and the pain in his eyes hit me like a physical blow. But there was something else there too. Confusion, anger, and buried deep. A plea I couldn't quite read. We should go, Marcus said quietly, the first words he'd spoken. Of course, son. Richard squeezed his shoulder. We've made our point. They left together, Richard's arm around Marcus's shoulders like a shackle. I sat frozen, watching my stepson walk away with the man who terrorized him as a child. In the parking lot afterward, Emma exploded. She'd been waiting by my car, having driven over after I texted about the meeting. How could he? She was crying, furious tears streaming down her face. How could Marcus stand there with that monster? After everything Mom did to protect him, Richard appeared around the corner, Marcus still beside him. Emma whirled on them. You're betraying Mom's memory, she spat at Marcus. She spent her whole life protecting you from him, and this is how you repay her. Richard stepped forward smoothly. Young lady, I understand David has poisoned you against your brother's real family, but I'm just trying to help Marcus claim his rightful inheritance. Something your mother tried to deny him. You're a liar, Emma said. Richard's smile never wavered. Marcus, tell your sister about the emails I showed you. Tell her how your mother promised me money to stay away. Tell her how David knew all along and did nothing. Marcus's jaw worked silently. He looked between Emma and me, then back to Richard. We need to go, he said again. They left in Richard's rental car. Emma sobbed against my shoulder in the parking lot while other people walked past, carefully not looking at us. That night, I went through Linda's folder again. One document made my stomach turn. Richard had been threatening to contest the will for months, claiming Linda had stolen his son and demanding compensation. The threats escalated with each message. In one, he wrote, I'll take everything from you like you took everything from me, starting with Marcus. Sarah came by the next morning. She'd been only 6 when Marcus was attacked, but she remembered that night. I woke up when Mom got the call, she said, curled up on the couch with coffee. She was crying, begging someone on the phone. She kept saying, please don't make this worse for Marcus. Who was she talking to? Sarah shook her head. I don't know, but she was terrified, more scared than when we heard about the attack. I decided to check on Marcus. His apartment building felt different somehow, heavier with foreboding. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was getting her mail. Oh, David, she said, surprised. Marcus moved out yesterday, seemed upset. An older man helped him pack, said he was family. Inside Marcus's apartment, boxes sat stacked by the door. Not everything, but enough to show he was serious about leaving. His work awards still hung on the wall. Photos of Linda still sat on the mantle, but the photo of all of us at Sarah's high school graduation was face down on the coffee table. I drove home to find Richard in my driveway, taking photos of the house with his phone. He looked up casually as I parked, just documenting what should have been my son's home, he said. You know, if his real father had been allowed to raise him. Get off my property. Richard pocketed his phone slowly. Did you know Linda and I were high school sweethearts? Before she got pregnant and trapped me into marriage? Before she poisoned Marcus against me? She protected him from you. Is that what she told you? Richard laughed. Let me guess. She painted me as some kind of monster. Made you believe you were the hero, saving them both. He stepped closer. You playing hero that night Marcus got hit doesn't make you his father. I've done my research, David. I know all about how you swooped in, the grieving widower who needed a family. How convenient that Linda was vulnerable and desperate. Leave. Now. Richard smiled. Marcus is already starting to see the truth. How you all lied to him. How you kept him from his real family. Did you know he has 2 half-brothers? My son's with my wife. They're excited to meet him. He got in his car but rolled down the window. Oh, and David, that adoption of the girls you're so proud of? My lawyer thinks there might be some irregularities there too. After all, Linda had a history of keeping fathers from their children. I stood in my driveway long after he'd driven away, Richard's words echoing in my head. Linda had been right to worry. Richard hadn't come back for Marcus. He'd come back for revenge, and he was using Marcus to get it. That evening, Emma called crying. She'd been checking social media and discovered Marcus had blocked both sisters on everything, but not before adding Richard and several strangers with the last name Hayward, the family Marcus never knew existed. He replaced us, Emma sobbed. He just erased us and replaced us with them. I thought about calling Marcus again, but didn't. What would I say? That his biological father was a manipulator? He'd think I was trying to poison him against Richard, exactly what Richard claimed I'd been doing all along. Instead, I called Mr. Chen. We needed to prepare for whatever Richard was planning. The formal letter from Richard's attorney arrived the next day, demanding half of Linda's estate and questioning the validity of my adoption of the girls. The war Richard had started was just beginning, and he was using Marcus as his primary weapon. I sat in Linda's office that night, surrounded by her files, trying to understand how we'd gotten here, how grief and carefully planted lies could turn a son against the family who'd loved him for 25 years, how a ghost from the past could destroy everything Linda had worked to build. The house felt empty without her, without Marcus, without the family we'd once been, but I couldn't give up. Not on Marcus, not on what Linda would have wanted. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Marcus's number. No call, not yet, but I typed out a simple text. Your mother loved you more than life itself. So do I. That will never change. I hit send before I could reconsider. The message showed as delivered, but not read. It might never be read, but I had to try. For Linda. For the boy who'd once called me dad in a hospital room. For the family Richard was trying to destroy. Tomorrow, I'd meet with Mr. Chen again. We'd figure out how to fight this, how to prove the emails were forged, how to show Marcus the truth before Richard's poison took hold completely. But tonight, I sat in Linda's chair, holding the folder marked, "Do not worry, David," and wished she was here to tell me what to do next. The twins' college funds were frozen within 48 hours. I discovered this when Sarah called me in tears from her apartment, explaining that her medical school acceptance letter had arrived that morning, along with a deposit deadline she couldn't meet. The bank manager explained apologetically that all accounts connected to Linda's estate were under legal hold pending the dispute. Emma drove home from campus that afternoon, her face set with determination that reminded me painfully of Linda. She spread her laptop and notebooks across the kitchen table, diving into research about Richard Hayward with the intensity of someone preparing for war. Within hours, she discovered inconsistencies in his story about having a new family. The photos on his social media profiles showed 2 teenage boys he claimed were Marcus's half-brothers. Emma ran reverse image searches and found the same photos on a stock photography website. The supposed family home in the background appeared in real estate listings from 3 different states. Every detail Richard had shared with Marcus about his real family was fabricated. I hired a private investigator that week, a recommendation from Mr. Chen. The investigator, a quiet woman named Alex, specialized in financial fraud cases. She warned me that men like Richard often had patterns, and she'd start by tracing his movements over the past decade. Sarah confronted Marcus at his workplace the following Monday. She waited in the lobby of his office building until he emerged for lunch, then followed him to a nearby cafe. She found him sitting alone at a corner table, staring at his phone with hollow eyes. He'd lost weight in the 2 weeks since I'd seen him at the lawyer's office, his usually crisp shirt wrinkled, his face haggard. When Sarah approached his table, Marcus flinched. She later told me he looked around frantically, as if expecting Richard to materialize. Sarah sat down anyway, pushing a folder across the table containing Emma's research about the fake family photos. Marcus's hands shook as he flipped through the pages, but he pushed them back without speaking. He stood to leave, and Sarah grabbed his wrist, noticing fresh bruises on his forearm where someone had gripped too tightly. Richard appeared at Emma's college apartment 3 days later. Her roommates were in class, and Emma was alone when the knock came. Through the peephole, she saw Richard standing in the hallway, holding a bouquet of flowers. She didn't open the door, instead calling campus security while Richard continued knocking, his voice carrying through the door as he explained he just wanted to talk about her brother, about family, about making things right. Campus security arrived to find Richard had already left, but Emma was shaken. She installed a new deadbolt that night and started carrying pepper spray. She also discovered Richard had been asking other residents about her schedule, claiming to be a concerned family friend. The investigator's first report arrived at the end of the week. Alex had traced Richard's history through multiple states, uncovering a pattern of aliases and elder financial abuse cases. He'd targeted 3 other families over the past 8 years, always involving a biological child he could manipulate. In each case, he'd extracted money through emotional manipulation before disappearing when legal pressure mounted. One case in Arizona particularly chilled me. Richard had convinced an adult daughter that her stepmother had stolen her inheritance, manipulating her into signing over power of attorney. The family lost their home before the daughter realized the truth. The stepmother's journal, submitted as evidence in that case, described Richard's tactics in terms that felt sickeningly familiar. I found Richard at Linda's grave on a gray Thursday morning. He knelt beside her headstone, arranging fresh sunflowers while speaking softly. As I approached, I heard him telling Linda he forgave her, that he understood she'd done what she thought was best, that he just wanted to make things right with their son. Marcus was there too, standing several feet back, his shoulders hunched against the cold. He saw me coming and tensed, but didn't move. Richard continued his performance, seemingly unaware of my presence until I stood directly beside him. Richard looked up with practiced surprise, then rose slowly, brushing dirt from his knees. He gestured at the flowers, explaining how he'd remembered Linda loved sunflowers from their high school days. The calculation in his eyes contradicted every word of manufactured sentiment. I told Richard to leave. He smiled sadly, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder and commenting on how some people couldn't let go of control, even in death. Marcus stood frozen between us, his face a mask of confusion and exhaustion. When Richard suggested they leave together, Marcus hesitated before following, but not before I saw him glance back at Linda's grave with an expression of pure anguish. Dr. Jameson called that evening. Marcus's therapist for the past 5 years was concerned. Marcus had canceled all appointments after starting contact with Richard, claiming therapy was just another way I'd tried to control him. Dr. Jameson couldn't share details due to confidentiality, but wanted me to know he was worried about Marcus's mental state. The investigator uncovered more about Richard's current situation. He'd been living in a motel on the outskirts of town, paying week to week in cash. His car was a rental under an expired credit card. Everything about his life suggested a man running out of options, making this grab for Linda's estate his most desperate move yet. Sarah and Emma planned an intervention for the following Sunday. They invited Marcus through his work email, the only contact method he hadn't blocked. They reserved a private room at a restaurant restaurant Marcus used to love, hoping neutral ground might help. They asked me to wait in the parking lot, worried my presence might drive Marcus away immediately. Sunday arrived, but Marcus didn't. Instead, Richard sent a text from Marcus's phone to both girls, saying Marcus was with his real family now and didn't need their interference. The syntax was clearly Richard's, not Marcus's usual writing style. Emma screenshot the message, adding it to her growing file of evidence. I drove to Richard's motel that night. The desk clerk recognized Marcus's photo, mentioning he'd been there several times, always looking upset. She'd heard arguing from Richard's room, though she couldn't make out words. She also mentioned Richard had been buying bottles of whiskey from the liquor store next door. Room 237 had its curtains drawn, but light leaked around the edges. I could hear the television and muffled voices. I knocked, and everything went silent. After a long moment, Richard opened the door just wide enough to peer out. Behind him, I glimpsed Marcus slumped on the bed, an empty glass on the nightstand. Richard blocked my attempt to enter, smoothly explaining that Marcus was processing difficult truths about his childhood. He suggested I leave before causing more damage. Over his shoulder, Marcus stirred but didn't look up. The room reeked of alcohol and stale food. I left only because forcing my way in would give Richard ammunition for his legal claims, but I sat in my car in the parking lot for hours, watching their door. Around midnight, Marcus emerged alone, stumbling slightly. He walked to the vending machine, feeding in crumpled bills with shaking hands. Under the harsh fluorescent light, he looked broken. Our eyes met across the parking lot. For a moment, I thought he might come over. Instead, he grabbed his sodas and hurried back inside. But in that brief connection, I saw the boy who'd once called me dad in a hospital room, now drowning in confusion and manipulation. Emma discovered Richard's mistake the next day. While live streaming a study session with classmates, she'd left her phone propped up on her desk. In the background, barely audible, her laptop picked up a notification sound. She'd received a video message that appeared to be from Marcus, but the metadata showed it originated from Richard's phone. She opened it during the live stream, not realizing the significance until later. The video showed Richard in his motel room, unaware he was being recorded. He spoke on the phone with someone, his voice clear and contemptuous. He called Marcus pathetic, said the boy was easier to manipulate than expected, that the estate would be theirs within weeks. The live stream had automatically saved to Emma's cloud storage. More importantly, it had been streaming to Marcus's tablet, which he'd given Emma months ago for her studies, but never removed from his account. The notification showed the video had been viewed on his device. I was reviewing Linda's files again when my phone rang at 2 a.m. Marcus's number appeared on the screen. His voice was slurred but urgent, asking me to come get him. He was at a restaurant parking lot 20 minutes away. Richard had brought him there for a late dinner, but something had happened. Marcus couldn't explain clearly, just kept repeating that he needed to leave. I found him sitting on a concrete barrier behind the restaurant, his shirt torn at the shoulder. His left eye was beginning to swell. Inside the restaurant, through the windows, I could see Richard arguing with the manager while two servers looked on nervously. A security guard stood nearby, hand on his radio. Marcus climbed into my car without speaking. As I drove toward the hospital to have his eye examined, he finally explained in halting sentences. Richard had been drinking heavily at dinner, becoming increasingly aggressive about the estate. When Marcus questioned the forged emails, Richard grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks. Marcus tried to leave, and Richard shoved him into a wall. Other diners had intervened, pulling Richard away. The manager called security while Richard ranted about ungrateful sons and stolen inheritances. Multiple witnesses saw Richard as the aggressor, their statements already being documented by restaurant security. At the hospital, while a doctor examined Marcus's injuries, he broke down completely. The past 2 weeks came pouring out in a confused jumble. Richard showing him fabricated evidence, the constant pressure to sign documents, the threats about publishing embarrassing family photos if Marcus didn't cooperate, the isolation from his sisters, the alcohol Richard pushed on him to keep him compliant. Marcus admitted he'd seen Emma's livestream video that afternoon. Hearing Richard call him pathetic, discussing him like a tool to be used, had shattered whatever hold Richard had established. He'd confronted Richard at dinner, leading to the altercation. I sat beside his hospital bed, not speaking, just being present like I'd always tried to be. When the doctor finished, Marcus looked at me with clearer eyes than I'd seen in weeks. He apologized, his voice breaking, not just for the past 2 weeks, but for 25 years of keeping me at arm's length. Sarah and Emma arrived as the sun rose, having driven through the night after my call. They sandwiched Marcus between them on the narrow hospital bed, the three siblings clinging to each other. For the first time since Linda's death, we felt like a family again, united against the threat Richard posed. The police took Marcus's statement that morning. With multiple witness accounts from the restaurant and documentation of Richard's harassment, they issued a temporary restraining order. Richard would be arrested if he attempted contact with any of us. We drove home together, all four of us cramped in my car. Marcus sat in the back between his sisters, looking exhausted but present in a way he hadn't been for months. As we pulled into the driveway, he noticed the front door had been vandalized. Dead flowers from Linda's grave were scattered on the porch, and an envelope was taped to the door. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Richard, full of venom and threats. He called Marcus weak, said David had poisoned another generation, promised this wasn't over. Emma photographed everything for evidence while Sarah called the police to report the restraining order violation. Marcus stood in the doorway of Linda's office, looking at the boxes I still hadn't sorted. He asked if we could go through them together, saying he needed to remember who his mother really was, not the version Richard had tried to create. We spent the afternoon sorting through photos and documents, Marcus sharing memories he'd kept locked away for years. In one box, we found Linda's journal from the year she left Richard. Her entries detailed the escalating abuse, her fear for Marcus's safety, the night she finally fled with nothing but their clothes. One entry described finding me at a grief support group, how I'd seemed safe in a way she'd forgotten men could be. Marcus read that entry 3 times, tears streaming down his face. He'd never known his mother had been in therapy, had worked so hard to heal from Richard's damage. He'd never understood how much courage it took for her to trust again, to build the family we'd become. The lawyer called with good news. The restaurant had provided security footage of Richard's assault on Marcus. Combined with the live stream video and witness statements, Richard's legal claims were crumbling. Mr. Chen was confident the estate dispute would be dismissed and the restraining order made permanent. That evening, as we prepared prepared dinner together for the first time in months. Marcus asked if he could move back home temporarily. Richard had manipulated him into breaking his apartment lease, and he needed time to regroup. Sarah and Emma immediately started planning, arguing over who would give up their room when they visited. I watched my 3 children laughing together in the kitchen, Linda's kitchen, and felt her presence strongly. She'd known this might happen, had tried to protect us even while dying. The folder marked, "Do not worry, David," had contained everything we needed to fight Richard, gathered by a woman who understood the man's patterns better than anyone. Richard was arrested 2 days later at Linda's grave, violating the restraining order. The groundskeeper had called police after recognizing him from a description we'd provided. He was destroying Linda's flowers, screaming about stolen families and justice denied. The mediation hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after Richard's arrest. Mr. Chen prepared us meticulously, gathering every document Linda had saved, every witness statement from the restaurant incident, and Alex's complete investigative report. Marcus spent hours recording his own timeline of events, documenting Richard's manipulation tactics with clinical precision. Sarah took a leave from her pre-med program to help organize evidence. She created a comprehensive presentation showing the forged emails' inconsistencies, highlighting phrases Richard had used that Linda never would have written. Emma compiled social media screenshots proving Richard's fake family photos, cross-referencing them with the stock photography sites. The morning of mediation arrived gray and humid. Marcus wore the suit he'd bought for his last promotion, the one Linda had helped him pick out. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie in my car's rearview mirror. Sarah and Emma flanked him as we walked into the courthouse, a united front against whatever Richard might attempt. Richard arrived representing himself, his previous lawyer having withdrawn after reviewing our evidence. He carried a battered briefcase and wore an ill-fitting suit that emphasized how far he'd fallen. His confident facade cracked slightly when he saw Marcus standing between his sisters. The mediator, a stern woman named Judge Coleman, reviewed the case materials with visible skepticism toward Richard's claims. She asked pointed questions about the supposed promises Linda had made, requesting original documents Richard couldn't produce. His explanations grew increasingly convoluted as the morning progressed. Mr. Chen presented our evidence methodically. The forged emails, the investigators' findings about Richard's pattern of elder abuse, the witness statements from the restaurant. When he played Emma's live stream video, Richard's face went pale. He hadn't known about the recording. Marcus took the witness stand after lunch. His voice started shaky but grew stronger as he detailed Richard's manipulation. He described the constant pressure, the isolation tactics, the way Richard had twisted his grief into weapon. When asked directly about his relationship with me, Marcus paused, looking directly at me for the first time that day. He spoke for 20 minutes about every moment I'd shown up without being asked, the driving lessons, the hospital vigils, the quiet presence during Linda's illness. He explained how Richard had tried to rewrite these memories, painting them as control rather than care. His voice broke when he described realizing the truth through Emma's video. Richard's cross-examination attempt backfired spectacularly. His questions grew increasingly aggressive, revealing the angry, entitled man beneath the smooth exterior. When he demanded to know why Marcus had believed his lies initially, Marcus's response was simple and devastating. He'd been grieving his mother and desperate for any connection to his past, making him vulnerable to manipulation. The mediator called a recess after Richard slammed his hand on the table, shouting about stolen years and ungrateful children. Security stepped closer as Richard's mask completely slipped, calling Marcus the same words he'd used in that motel room recording. The court reporter captured every word. During the break, Marcus found me in the hallway. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a folded piece of paper worn soft from handling. It was the Father's Day card he'd made in elementary school but never gave me, kept in his wallet for over 20 years. The crayon drawing showed stick figures labeled Marcus and Dad David playing catch. The afternoon session was brief. Judge Coleman had seen enough. She dismissed Richard's claims entirely, noting the pattern of fraud and manipulation evident in his history. She confirmed the validity of Linda's will and recommended criminal charges for the forged documents. The restraining order was extended indefinitely. Richard's explosion was immediate and violent. He lunged across the table toward Marcus, screaming about betrayal and stolen inheritance. Security restrained him as he continued ranting, his careful persona completely shattered. They dragged him out, still shouting threats, ensuring additional charges would be filed. Outside the courthouse, Marcus stood on the steps taking deep breaths of humid air. Sarah and Emma hugged him from both sides while I stood back, giving them space. Then Marcus turned to me, his eyes clear and determined. He asked if we could stop at the sports store on the way home. He wanted to buy new baseball gloves. The house felt different when we returned, lighter somehow, despite the same boxes still filling Linda's office. Marcus walked through each room slowly, touching familiar objects as if seeing them for the first time. He paused at the kitchen table where Linda used to help him with homework, running his fingers across the worn wood. That evening, we ordered pizza and sat around the living room like we hadn't in years. Marcus pulled out photo albums, sharing stories about Linda I'd never heard. He talked about her strength during those early years, how she'd worked 2 jobs while attending night school, determined to build a better life for them both. Sarah mentioned she'd contacted the medical school about her deposit situation. With the legal hold lifted, she could access her funds again. The relief in her voice made Marcus flinch. He apologized again for the chaos he'd caused, but Emma cut him off. Family meant standing together, especially against threats like Richard. Marcus returned to therapy the following week. Dr. Jameson later told me it was one of the most productive sessions they'd had in years. Marcus was finally ready to process not just his grief over Linda, but the complex feelings about father figures that had haunted him since childhood. The work would be ongoing, but he'd taken the crucial first step. 3 weeks later, we held a small ceremony at Linda's grave. Marcus had suggested it, wanting to reclaim the space Richard had contaminated. We brought fresh sunflowers and spent an hour sharing favorite memories. Marcus spoke directly to the headstone, thanking Linda for protecting him, for choosing me, for building the family that Richard had tried to destroy. The Linda Reeves Memorial Scholarship was established a month later. Marcus insisted on contributing from his savings, wanting to honor his mother's memory by helping other single mothers pursue education. The first recipient was announced at a small community community center gathering. Marcus spoke briefly about Linda's journey and the importance of chosen family. Work had been understanding about Marcus's situation, but he decided to take a different position within the company, one with less travel, more stability. He wanted to be present for his family in a way he hadn't allowed himself before. His new office was closer to home, close enough for lunch visits. Sarah started medical school that fall. Marcus drove her to orientation, the car loaded with supplies they'd shopped for together. Emma decided to add a pre-law minor to her degree, inspired by Mr. Chen's dedication to protecting families like theirs. She talked about specializing in family law, helping others navigate complex situations. Marcus moved back home temporarily, but found his own apartment after 6 months. It was only 10 minutes away, close enough for spontaneous dinners, but far enough to maintain healthy independence. He kept a photo from our first game of catch on his desk, 2 figures in the backyard, finally connecting after 25 years. The following Thanksgiving was quiet, but complete. Marcus arrived early to help cook, wearing Linda's apron without self-consciousness. He'd practiced her stuffing recipe until it was perfect, determined to maintain family traditions. Sarah and Emma bickered good-naturedly about table settings, while I watched my complete family prepare for the holiday. Richard's final legal attempt came through a different lawyer, claiming emotional distress from the restraining order. It was dismissed immediately, with the judge noting Richard's extensive criminal record from the elder abuse cases. He received 18 months in minimum security for fraud and violation of the restraining order. Marcus felt no satisfaction at the news, only relief that it was truly over. Hannah, Marcus's girlfriend, returned gradually to his life. She'd waited patiently through the chaos, understanding he needed to heal family wounds first. When Marcus finally introduced her properly at Sunday dinner, she fit naturally into our dynamic. She shared stories of her own complicated family, understanding the power of chosen bonds. The baseball gloves got regular use. Every weekend Marcus could manage. We played catch in the backyard, not trying to recapture lost time, but building something new. Sometimes Sarah and Emma joined us, their throws wild but enthusiastic. The simple rhythm of the ball moving back and forth became meditation, communication without words. One evening, while helping me sort through the last of Linda's boxes, Marcus found her wedding album from our ceremony. He studied each photo carefully, seeing details he'd missed as a sullen teenager. In one candid shot, I was adjusting his boutonniere while he looked away, resistant but allowing the contact. Linda watched us both with hope in her eyes. Marcus asked if he could have that photo enlarged. He wanted it for his apartment, a reminder of how patient love could overcome even the deepest resistance. We had it framed together, choosing a simple wood frame that Linda would have liked. He hung it where he could see it every morning, starting each day with gratitude for the family that had never given up on him. The 1-year anniversary of Linda's death approached with less dread than expected. We planned a celebration of life, focusing on joy rather than loss. Marcus created a photo slideshow, including pictures from throughout their lives. He asked me to speak about meeting Linda, about choosing to love a broken family and helping them heal. That night, after everyone had gone home, Marcus stayed behind. We sat on the porch in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the humid darkness. He mentioned he'd been thinking about the future, about the kind of father he wanted to be someday. Not biological versus chosen, but simply present, simply there.